You've seen me undressed. Now you must marry me or they'll punish us both." These desperate words, spoken by a captive Apache woman in 1879 New Mexico, would forever change the life of Cole Maddox, a hardened freight guard who stumbled into the wrong room at the wrong time. What began as a simple supply run became a deadly chase across the desert, where honor, survival, and unexpected love collided in the unforgiving American frontier. Welcome to this epic tale of courage and redemption. If you're watching from anywhere around the world, drop your city in the comments below. I love seeing how far these frontier stories travel. Now let's dive into a story where a moment's glimpse would bind two souls together in ways neither could imagine. The freight wagon's wheels ground to a halt outside Murphy's trading post, sending up a cloud of red dust that hung in the still New Mexico air like smoke from a dying fire. Cole Maddox wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his weathered hand, his steel-gray eyes scanning the ramshackle buildings that made up what passed for civilization in this god-forsaken corner of the territory. It was October of 1879, and the autumn sun beat down mercilessly on the high desert plateau. Cole had been riding guard on supply runs for the better part of 3 years now, ever since he'd mustered out of the cavalry with a bullet scar across his ribs and a head full of memories he'd rather forget. The work suited him long stretches of solitude, broken only by the company of other hard men who asked few questions about a man's past. "Murphy," Cole called out as he swung down from the wagon's bench seat, "got your supplies from Santa Fe." The trading post door creaked open, and Sean Murphy emerged, his bulbous frame filling the doorway. Murphy was a man who'd grown prosperous, if you could call it that, by serving as middleman between the scattered ranches, the cavalry posts, and anyone else with coin enough to pay his inflated prices. "Maddox, about damn time." Murphy grunted, his Irish accent still thick despite 20 years in the territory. "Was beginning to think the Apaches got you." Cole began unloading crates from the wagon bed, his movements economical and precise. "Apaches got better things to do than bother with freight wagons, most of them anyway." Murphy's eyes narrowed. "Don't be so sure about that. Had some trouble here just last week. Found sign of unshod ponies not 5 miles south. Could be renegades." "Or it could be nothing," Cole replied, hefting a crate of ammunition onto his shoulder. "Where you want these?" "Back room as usual. You know the way." Cole had made this run a dozen times or more, and he did indeed know the way. Murphy's back room served as a combination storage area and informal meeting place for the kind of men who conducted business better left unexamined in daylight. Cole had learned not to pay too much attention to what went on back there, as long as Murphy's money was good. He shouldered the crate and made his way around the building to the rear entrance. The door stood slightly ajar, which was unusual. Murphy was normally cautious about security, especially when it came to his valuable inventory. Cole nudged the door open with his boot and stepped inside, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior. The familiar smell of tobacco leather and gun oil filled his nostrils, but there was something else, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up, the metallic scent of blood. "Murphy," he called out softly, setting the crate down and letting his hand drift toward the Colt .45 at his hip. That's when he heard a soft rustling from the far corner of the room, behind a stack of grain sacks. Cole drew his pistol and moved forward cautiously, his boots silent on the dirt floor. "Who's there?" he demanded. The rustling stopped. Then a voice, young female and speaking in accented English, "Please do not hurt me." Cole rounded the grain sacks and froze. Huddled in the corner was a young Apache woman, perhaps 20 years of age, with long black hair that fell like a curtain around her bare shoulders. Her dress, what remained of it, was torn and stained with blood and dirt. Dark bruises marked her arms and face, and her eyes held the haunted look of someone who had seen too much suffering. For a moment, neither of them moved. Cole's mind raced, trying to process what he was seeing. An Apache woman, clearly a captive, hidden in Murphy's back room like stolen goods. The woman's eyes met his, and in them he saw not just fear, but something else, a desperate calculation. She pulled the tattered remains of her dress more tightly around herself, and spoke again, her voice steady despite her obvious terror. "You have seen me like this," she said, her English careful and precise. "Now you must marry me, or they will punish us both." Cole's hand tightened on his pistol grip. "What are you talking about?" "It is our way," she continued, never taking her eyes from his face. "When a man sees an unmarried woman, undressed, he must take her as wife or both face punishment. Death, perhaps." "Your way, maybe, but not mine," Cole said, though he didn't holster his weapon. "What are you doing here? Who did this to you?" Before she could answer, heavy footsteps sounded on the front porch of the trading post. Cole heard Murphy's voice along with two others he didn't recognize. "She's got to be worth something to somebody," one of the strangers was saying. "Apache women know how to work, and this one's young enough to bear children." "Maybe," Murphy replied, "but she's been nothing but trouble since Hawkins brought her in. Won't eat, won't work, keeps trying to escape." Cole felt his jaw tighten. He looked back at the young woman who had pressed herself further into the corner, her dark eyes wide with fear. "What's your name?" he whispered. "Tahana," she replied. "It means merciful in my language." "Merciful," Cole repeated. "I'm Cole Maddox." The voices outside were getting closer. Cole made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Can you ride?" he asked quickly. Tahana nodded. "Then we're getting out of here, right now." Cole shrugged out of his leather jacket and handed it to her. "Put this on." While Tahana struggled into the oversized garment, Cole moved to the room's single window and peered out. His horse was still tied to the hitching post out front, but that was too exposed. Murphy kept a small remuda of horses in a corral behind the trading post. If they could reach it without being seen— "Listen to me carefully," Cole whispered. "We're going to go out the back way, circle around to the horse corral. You pick out the best mount you can handle, and I'll get my own horse. Then we ride hard and fast until we're clear of this place." "Why?" Tahana asked, her voice barely audible. "Why would you help me?" Cole met her gaze. In her eyes he saw something he recognized, the look of someone who had been beaten down but refused to surrender. It was a look he'd seen in his own mirror more times than he cared to remember. "Because nobody deserves to be bought and sold like livestock," he said simply. The front door of the trading post banged open, and Murphy's voice boomed out, "Maddox, where the hell are you? We need to talk." Cole cursed under his breath. "Time's up. Can you move quiet?" Tahana nodded and rose to her feet with surprising grace, despite her injuries. Cole led the way to the back door, pausing to listen before easing it open. The coast was clear. They slipped out into the afternoon heat and made their way toward the corral, keeping low and using the scattered outbuildings as cover. Cole's heart hammered in his chest, not from fear, but from the certainty that he was crossing a line he could never uncross. The horses in the corral were typical frontier stock hardy, if not beautiful. Tahana studied them for a moment, then pointed to a rangy paint mare. "That one," she whispered. "She has good eyes, strong legs." Cole nodded approvingly. The girl knew horses. He quickly fashioned a makeshift bridle from a length of rope, while Tahana gentled the mare with soft words in her native tongue. "Maddox," Murphy's voice was closer now, tinged with anger and suspicion. "I know you're back there somewhere." Cole boosted Tahana onto the paint's back, then vaulted the corral fence and sprinted toward the front of the building where his own mount waited. His bay gelding nickered softly as Cole untied the reins and swung into the saddle. "There he is!" The shout came from one of Murphy's companions, a lean man with a scraggly beard and cold eyes. "And he's got the squaw." Cole spurred his horse around the corner of the building as the sound of running feet filled the air behind him. Tahana was already mounted and waiting, the paint mare dancing nervously beneath her. "This way," Cole shouted, pointing toward the open desert to the west. They rode hard from the trading post, the horses' hooves kicking up plumes of dust in their wake. Behind them, Cole could hear shouting and the sound of pursuit being organized. Murphy would have horses and men willing to ride them for the right price. For the first mile, they rode in silence, focused on putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. The desert stretched out before them like an ocean of red earth and scattered sage broken by distant mesas that shimmered in the heat. Finally, Cole slowed his mount to a trot and glanced back. No sign of pursuit yet, but that wouldn't last long. "Where can we go?" Tahana asked, pulling alongside him. "They will follow." Cole studied the terrain ahead. To the north lay the settlements and cavalry posts, places where a white man traveling with an Apache woman would draw unwanted attention. To the south was deeper desert, but also the possibility of encountering hostile bands of raiders from across the Mexican border. "West," he decided, "toward the mountains. If we can reach the high country, we'll have a better chance of losing them." Tahana nodded, but Cole caught the doubt in her expression. "What is it?" he asked. "The mountains. They are sacred to my people. But not all of my people would welcome me now. I have been among the white eyes too long. I am," she struggled for the English word, "tainted." Cole felt anger flare in his chest, not at her, but at the circumstances that had brought her to this point. "You're not tainted. You're a survivor. Is there a difference?" The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Cole didn't have an answer, at least not one that would satisfy either of them. They rode on in contemplative silence until the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Cole called a halt in a shallow arroyo that offered some concealment from prying eyes. "We'll rest the horses here," he said, dismounting, "but not for long. They'll be tracking us by now." Tahana slid down from her mount with fluid grace, then immediately went to work examining the mare's legs and hooves. Cole watched her, impressed by her competence. She moved like someone who had been born on horseback. "You know horses," he observed. "My father was a great warrior," she replied without looking up. "He taught me that a horse could mean the difference between life and death. A warrior who does not understand horses will not live long." "What happened to him?" "Your father," Tahana's hands stilled on the mare's fetlock. "Dead. 5 winters passed. The soldiers came to our camp during the season of big leaves. They said we had raided their settlements, killed their cattle. It was not true. We had been at peace for many moons. But they did not listen." Cole felt a familiar tightness in his chest. He had been one of those soldiers, though not during that particular campaign. He had ridden with units that had done exactly what Tahana described, struck first and asked questions later, if at all. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. Tahana looked up at him, studying his face with those dark, penetrating eyes. "You were a soldier." It wasn't a question, and Cole saw no point in denying it. "Yes, cavalry got out 3 years ago. Did you kill my people?" The question was asked quietly, without accusation, but it hit Cole like a physical blow. Yes, I did what I was ordered to do." Tahana nodded slowly, as if confirming something she had already suspected. "And now you save one of my people. Why?" Cole checked his horse's girth strap, using the action to buy himself time to think. "Because what they were planning to do to you, it wasn't right. Man shouldn't own another person, no matter what color their skin is, even if that person is your enemy." Cole met her gaze. "Are you my enemy, Tahana?" She considered the question seriously before answering. "I do not know. Are you mine, Cole Maddox?" Before he could respond, the sound of distant hoofbeats drifted across the desert air. Their pursuers had found their trail. "Time to go," Cole said grimly, swinging back into his saddle. They pushed their mounts hard as the sun sank lower in the sky, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Behind them, the dust cloud of their pursuers grew steadily larger. 3 men, Cole estimated, maybe 4, good riders on fresh horses. "They're gaining on us." Tahana observed, her voice calm despite the circumstances. Cole nodded. Their mounts were tired, and pushing them much harder would risk foundering them completely. They needed a plan, and fast. Ahead, the desert began to rise toward a line of low hills studded with juniper and pinyon pine. Cole pointed toward a gap between two of the larger hills. "If we can reach that pass before they get within rifle range, we might have a chance," he said. But even as he spoke, he could see it would be close. Too close. The first rifle shot cracked across the desert when they were still 500 yards from the hills. The bullet whined harmlessly overhead, but it served as a stark reminder of their peril. "They're just trying to spook us into running our horses to death," Cole called out. "Don't let them rush us into making mistakes." A second shot followed closer this time. Cole could now make out individual riders. In the pursuing party, 4 men, as he had guessed, strung out in a rough line. The leader was a big man on a black horse, and something about his silhouette seemed familiar. "Hawkins?" Tahana said, following Cole's gaze. "The one who brought me to Murphy." Cole had heard the name before. Jake Hawkins was a bounty hunter and slave trader who operated along the frontier dealing in human misery. He specialized in capturing Apache women and children to sell to brothels and work gangs in Mexico and California. "Friend of yours?" Cole asked grimly. "He killed my brother," Tahana replied, her voice flat. "Took me and 2 other women from our camp near the river. The others, they did not survive the journey." Cole felt his jaw tighten. "Well, then I guess we know how this ends." They reached the mouth of the pass just as the sun touched the western horizon. The gap between the hills was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 riders abreast, and the walls rose steeply on either side. It was perfect defensive terrain if they could hold it. Cole dismounted and pulled his Winchester rifle from its scabbard. "Take the horses up the trail about 50 yards and find cover," he told Tahana. "If something happens to me, keep riding west. Don't look back." Tahana shook her head. "I will not leave you to fight alone. You don't have a choice. I'm not going to be responsible for—" "You are not responsible for me." Tahana's voice cracked like a whip. "I choose my own path, Cole Maddox. I choose to stand with you." Before he could argue further, she slid down from her horse and pulled a knife from somewhere beneath his jacket. It was a wicked-looking blade, clearly Apache made, with intricate beadwork on the handle. "Where did you—" "They did not search carefully enough," she said simply. "My grandmother's knife. It has drunk the blood of many enemies." The sound of approaching hooves echoed off the canyon walls. Cole positioned himself behind a large boulder at the narrowest point of the pass, while Tahana took cover on the opposite side. Their horses, ground-tied, shifted nervously behind them. "This is far enough, Hawkins," Cole called out when the riders were about 100 yards away. "The woman's under my protection now." Hawkins' laughter echoed off the rock walls. "Protection from a washed-up freight guard. She's stolen property. Maddox and I aim to collect her. She's not property. She's a human being. She's a savage, and she belongs to whoever's got the strength to hold her. You want to die for Apache trash? That's your choice." Cole felt, rather than saw, Tahana tense at the insult. Her knuckles were white where she gripped her grandmother's knife. "Last warning, Hawkins," Cole shouted. "Turn around and ride away, or we settle this right here." In response, Hawkins spurred his horse forward, rifle raised. Cole drew a careful bead and squeezed the trigger. The Winchester boomed, and Hawkins pitched sideways in his saddle, clutching his shoulder. "Kill them both," Hawkins screamed as he fought to stay mounted. The narrow pass erupted in gunfire. Bullets sparked off the rocks around Cole's position as he worked the lever of his rifle and returned fire. One of the attackers cried out and toppled from his horse, but the odds were still against them. Cole was down to his last few cartridges when he heard a sound that made his blood freeze, the metallic click of a revolver being cocked directly behind him. "Drop the rifle, Maddox." Cole turned slowly to find Murphy standing 10 feet away, a Colt .44 trained on his chest. The Irishman's face was flushed with exertion and anger. "Should have minded your own business," Murphy panted. "Should have just delivered my supplies and ridden away. But no, you had to play the hero. How did you—" "There's another way into this canyon," Been using it for years to cache goods I don't want the cavalry finding. You picked the wrong place to make your stand." Cole's mind raced. Murphy was right. He was caught in a perfect crossfire between the men in front and Murphy behind. There was no way out. That's when Tahana moved. She came out of her concealment like a striking snake, covering the distance to Murphy in 3 silent strides. The traitor turned at the last second, but it was too late. Tahana's blade took him just below the ribs, angling upward toward the heart. Murphy's eyes went wide with shock and pain. His pistol discharged harmlessly into the ground as he collapsed, blood spreading across his white shirt. "The others are retreating," Tahana said calmly, wiping her blade clean on Murphy's vest. "They do not wish to die for a wounded man." Cole looked towards the mouth of the canyon and saw she was right. Hawkins and his remaining man were pulling back the bounty hunter, still clutching his wounded shoulder. "We'll meet again, Maddox," Hawkins shouted across the desert. "This isn't over." "Maybe not," Cole muttered, but he knew they had won this round. Hawkins would be back, but not today. As full darkness settled over the desert, Cole and Tahana made their way deeper into the canyon, leading their horses. They found a sheltered alcove with a spring of clear water and a view of the back trail. "We should rest here tonight," Cole said. "The horses need water and grain." Tahana nodded, but she seemed distant, preoccupied. Cole noticed she kept glancing at Murphy's body, which they had left beside the spring. "You did what you had to do," he told her. "He would have killed us both." "I know," she replied. "It is not his death that troubles me." "Then what?" Tahana was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. "When I was a child, my grandmother told me stories of the old days, when our people were free to roam where they pleased. She said that sometimes the spirits would send a sign, a moment when a person's true path would be revealed to them." She turned to look at Cole, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "I think this is such a moment, for both of us." Cole felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Hope, maybe, or the possibility of it. "What does that mean?" he asked. "I do not know yet," Tahana admitted, "but I think we are meant to find out together." As the desert night deepened around them, Cole found himself thinking about the choices that had brought him to this place. A simple supply run that had become something far more complicated and dangerous. A chance encounter that had bound his fate to that of a young Apache woman who should have been his enemy. He thought about her earlier question, "Are you my enemy?" Cole Maddox. Looking at her now, tending to their horses with quiet competence, he realized the answer had changed somewhere along the trail. She wasn't his enemy. She wasn't his captive or his responsibility either. She was his partner in whatever came next. The thought should have frightened him more than it did. The morning sun crested the canyon rim like a golden blade, casting long shadows across the rocky floor where Cole and Tahana had spent their first night as fugitives. Cole stirred from restless sleep, his hand instinctively moving to his rifle before his mind caught up with his surroundings. The events of the previous day rushed back. Murphy's blood still stained the rocks near the spring, a grim reminder of how quickly their world had changed. Tahana was already awake, sitting cross-legged beside the dying embers of their small fire. She had fashioned a crude comb from a piece of wood and was working it through her long black hair with methodical precision. The leather jacket Cole had given her hung loose around her shoulders, but she wore it with a dignity that made it seem like royal robes. "How long have you been up?" Cole asked, rolling out of his blanket. "Since the morning star appeared," she replied without looking at him. "In my dreams I heard horses coming from the east." Cole felt his muscles tense. Dreams or reality? With my people there is often little difference. Tahana set down her makeshift comb and turned to face him. "But these were dreams. The horses carried my ancestors, come to warn me that the path ahead will test more than our courage." Cole studied her face in the growing light. There was something different about her this morning, a resolve that hadn't been there the night before. The desperate, frightened woman he had found in Murphy's back room was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she belonged in this harsh landscape. "We need to keep moving," he said, rising to check on their horses. "Hawkins won't give up easily, and now that Murphy's dead, there'll be others looking for us." "Yes," Tahana agreed, but she made no move to break camp. "Cole, Maddox, before we ride further together, there are things you must know about me. Things that will help you understand why men like Hawkins hunt my people." Cole paused in his inspection of the bay gelding's hooves. Something in her tone warned him this conversation would be important. "My father was not just a warrior," Tahana continued. "He was a medicine man keeper of the old stories. Before the soldiers killed him, he taught me the sacred songs, the healing ways. Among my people, such knowledge is power, and power makes enemies." She stood and walked to where the paint mare grazed on sparse grass near the spring. Her hand moved along the horse's neck with practiced gentleness. "When Hawkins raided our camp, he was not looking for just any Apache woman. He knew who I was, what I carried in my mind and spirit. There are white men who pay much gold for Indian medicine, for the secrets of the old ways." Cole felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying he targeted you specifically?" "I believe so, and that means he will not stop hunting us. For him, I am not just property. I am valuable property." The implications of her words settled over Cole like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about a bounty hunter's wounded pride or Murphy's stolen goods. This was about something far more dangerous and lucrative. "What kind of men would pay for that knowledge?" he asked. Tahana's expression darkened. "The kind who believe that owning our secrets will give them power over life and death. They do not understand that true medicine cannot be stolen. It must be earned through sacrifice and wisdom, but their ignorance will not stop them from trying." Cole absorbed this information while he saddled his horse. It explained why Hawkins had seemed so determined, why he had risked so much to pursue them into the canyon. It also meant their situation was far more precarious than he had initially realized. "There's something else," Tahana said as she prepared her own mount. "Last night when I killed Murphy, something changed inside me. I felt free, but also bound. Does that make sense to you?" Cole considered her words. "Free from them, bound to this path we're on. Yes, but more than that. Bound to you, Cole Maddox. When a warrior saves another warrior in battle, they become spirit brothers. It is a sacred bond among my people." She turned to look at him directly. "I said yesterday that you must marry me because you saw me undressed. That was desperation, speaking fear, making me grasp for any protection. But this bond of shared battle, this is real, this is chosen." Cole felt something shift in his chest, a door opening that he had thought permanently sealed. "I'm not sure I understand the difference. Yesterday, I asked for your protection because I was afraid. Today, I offer you mine because I choose to. We are no longer just running from something, Cole Maddox. We are running towards something together." They mounted their horses and rode deeper into the canyon system, following a game trail that wound between towering red rock walls. The morning air was cool and sweet, with the scent of juniper and sage. For a few precious hours, it was almost possible to forget they were being hunted. But Cole's cavalry training wouldn't let him relax completely. He kept watching their back trail, listening for sounds that didn't belong to the natural world around them. His vigilance proved justified when they crested a low ridge and he caught sight of dust rising in the distance. Riders, at least 3 of them, following their trail with methodical persistence. "Company," he announced grimly. Tahana shaded her eyes and studied the distant dust cloud. "Hawkins is wounded, so he will have found new men, probably promised them gold to help him track us. Can you tell how far back they are?" 2 hours, maybe less. They are pushing their horses hard." She paused, then added quietly, "Cole, there is something I must tell you about the country ahead." Cole turned in his saddle to face her fully. "What is it?" The canyon we follow, it leads to a place sacred to my people, a place where the spirits are said to dwell. If we go there, we may find sanctuary, but we will also be trespassing on holy ground. Not all of my people would welcome that." Cole weighed their options. Behind them, Hawkins and his hired guns were gaining ground. Ahead lay the possibility of spiritual sanctuary, but also the risk of encountering hostile Apaches who might see Cole as just another white invader. "What do you think we should do?" he asked. Tahana was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes scanning the rugged landscape ahead. "My grandmother used to say that sometimes the spirits place us exactly where we need to be, even if we cannot see the reason. I think this is one of those times. Meaning we go forward and trust that our intentions will be judged fairly by whatever powers watch over that place." They rode on in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Cole found himself studying Tahana as she navigated the increasingly difficult terrain with unconscious skill. There was something mesmerizing about the way she moved with her horse, as if the two were parts of a single being. It reminded him of the finest cavalry riders he had known, men who lived and breathed horses from childhood. "Where did you learn to ride like that?" he asked during a brief rest. Tahana smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. It transformed her entire face, erasing years of hardship and revealing the young woman she might have been under different circumstances. "My father put me on a horse before I could walk properly. He said that a person who cannot read the language of horses will always be lost in the world." Smart man. Yes, he was. He could look at a horse and tell you its entire story, where it was born, how it had been treated, whether its rider was kind or cruel. He taught me that horses are honest in ways that people often are not. Cole nodded, understanding the truth in her words. In his years as a cavalry scout, he had learned to trust his horse's instincts as much as his own. A good horse could sense danger long before human eyes or ears detected it. "What does your horse tell you about me?" he asked, genuinely curious. Tahana studied him for a moment, her head tilted slightly to one side. "She says you are tired in your soul, but not broken. She says you carry old wounds, but they have not made you cruel. And she says—" She paused as if listening to something only she could hear. "She says you are a man who keeps his word even when it costs him dearly." The accuracy of her assessment unsettled Cole more than he cared to admit. "What about you? What does my horse say about you?" "He says I am not what I appear to be, that there is fire in me that has been banked but not extinguished. And he says I will either save you or destroy you, he cannot tell which." The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a distant fire. Cole found himself wondering which outcome was more likely and which one he should fear more. Their conversation was interrupted by the crack of a rifle shot echoing off the canyon walls. The bullet struck the rock face inches from Cole's head, sending chips of stone flying. "Move!" he shouted, spurring his horse forward. They raced along the narrow trail as more shots rang out behind them. Their pursuers had closed the distance faster than expected and were now within effective rifle range. Cole could hear Hawkins' voice bellowing orders to his men, his wounded shoulder apparently not hindering his ability to lead the chase. The trail ahead split in two directions, one leading up toward the rim of the canyon, the other descending deeper into the earth through a narrow slot between towering walls. "Which way?" Cole called out. "Down," Tahana replied without hesitation. "The sacred place lies in the heart of the earth." They plunged into the slot canyon, their horses' hooves ringing like bells on the rock floor. The walls rose so high above them that only a narrow ribbon of blue sky was visible. It was like riding through the throat of some ancient stone giant. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew fainter, but didn't disappear entirely. Hawkins and his men would follow, but they would have to slow down in the narrow confines of the slot canyon. Every twist and turn gave Cole and Tahana a few more precious seconds of lead time. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the slot canyon began to widen. The walls stepped back gradually, revealing glimpses of strange rock formations that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The air itself felt different here, charged with an energy that made Cole's skin prickle. "We are close," Tahana said softly. "Can you feel it?" Cole could indeed feel something, a presence that seemed to watch from every shadow, every crack in the stone walls. It wasn't menacing exactly, but it was undeniably powerful and alien to his understanding. They rounded a final bend and emerged into a circular chamber, perhaps 100 yards across. The walls rose straight up for several hundred feet before opening to the sky like a natural cathedral. In the center of the chamber stood a pool of crystal-clear water, fed by a spring that bubbled up from unknown depths. But what took Cole's breath away were the paintings. The walls of the chamber were covered with images painted in ochre and charcoal depicting scenes of hunts, battles, ceremonies, and journeys. Some looked recent, while others appeared to be incredibly ancient, their colors faded but still visible. It was like standing inside a library written in pictures, a record of countless generations of Apache history and belief. "The place of painted dreams," Tahana whispered, sliding down from her horse with obvious reverence. "My grandmother brought me here once when I was very young. She said this is where the spirits of our ancestors come to tell their stories to the living world." Cole dismounted more slowly, feeling like an intruder in a sacred space. The paintings seemed to watch him with unseen eyes, judging his worthiness to stand in this holy place. "Are we safe here?" he asked. "Safe from bullets, perhaps, but not from judgment." Tahana walked to the pool and knelt beside it, cupping the clear water in her hands. "The spirits will decide whether we deserve their protection." As if summoned by her words, a new voice echoed across the chamber, old, weathered, but carrying absolute authority. "Who brings the white eyes to the place of painted dreams?" Cole spun around his hand, moving instinctively toward his gun, but Tahana's sharp gesture stopped him. From the shadows near the far wall emerged an ancient Apache man, his face creased with age and wisdom. He wore traditional clothing, buckskin leggings, a breechclout, and a shirt decorated with intricate beadwork. His long gray hair was braided with feathers and small bones. "Grandfather," Tahana said, using the respectful term for an elder. "I am Tahana, daughter of Standing Bear, keeper of the old songs. I bring this man because he saved my life and chose to stand with me against our enemies." The old man studied Cole with eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "I know who you are, daughter of Standing Bear. Your father was my student before the soldiers took him to the spirit world. But this white eyes, what is his name among his people?" "Cole Maddox." Cole answered for himself, meeting the old man's gaze directly. "I was a soldier once, but now I'm just a man trying to do right by someone who deserves better than she's gotten." The elder nodded slowly. "At least you do not lie to me, Cole Maddox. That is a beginning." He turned back to Tahana. "You know the law of this place. No one may enter the sacred chamber unless they are prepared to face the truth of their own spirit. Are you both ready for such a test?" Tahana looked at Cole, a question in her dark eyes. He understood that this was a crossroads. They could still turn back and try to find another way to escape their pursuers, but doing so would mean abandoning whatever sanctuary this place might offer. "I'm ready," he said simply. The old man smiled, then the expression transforming his weathered features. "Good, then we begin. But first, you should know that your enemies have found the entrance to the canyon. They will be here soon, and when they arrive, they will learn what it means to violate sacred ground." As if to punctuate his words, the sound of approaching horses echoed from the slot canyon, Hawkins and his men drawn by their relentless pursuit into the heart of Apache spiritual power. Cole checked his rifle and counted his remaining ammunition. "How many bullets do you think it'll take?" he asked grimly. The old man chuckled, a sound like wind through dry leaves. "Bullets, white eyes, you still think like a soldier. This is not a place for war. This is a place for truth. Your enemies will face their own spirits here just as you must face yours." Tahana knelt again by the sacred pool, her reflection wavering in the still water. "Grandfather, will you perform the ceremony of binding Cole Maddox? And I have shed blood together, shared danger and trust. I would make him my spirit brother in the old way." Cole felt something tighten in his chest. He didn't fully understand what she was asking for, but he sensed it was significant, a formal acknowledgement of the bond that had been growing between them since the moment he found her in Murphy's back room. The old man considered her request. "The ceremony of binding is not undertaken lightly, granddaughter. Once performed, it cannot be undone. You will be linked in spirit until one or both of you journey to the land of shadows. Are you certain this is your wish?" "I am certain." The elder looked at Cole. "And you, white eyes, do you understand what she asks? Do you accept this bond freely, knowing that it will change you in ways you cannot imagine?" Cole thought about everything that had happened in the past day, the choices he had made, the path he had chosen. He thought about the woman kneeling beside the sacred pool who had faced captivity and abuse with unbroken courage, who had killed to save his life, who looked at him with eyes that held no judgment, despite knowing he had been among those who had brought such suffering to her people. "I accept," he said. The sound of horses was getting louder now, echoing off the chamber walls. Hawkins and his men would arrive within minutes, but somehow Cole found he wasn't afraid. Something about this place, about the presence of the ancient spirits represented in the painted walls, made earthly concerns seem distant and unimportant. The old man began to speak in Apache, his voice taking on a ritual cadence that seemed to resonate with the stone walls themselves. Though Cole couldn't understand the words, he felt their power washing over him like waves. Tahana joined in her voice, weaving harmoniously with the elders, creating a sound that was both beautiful and otherworldly. As the ceremony continued, Cole became aware of a presence at the entrance to the chamber. Hawkins and 3 other men sat their horses just inside the opening, but something was wrong. They weren't moving, weren't raising their weapons. They sat motionless as statues, their faces blank with an expression Cole had never seen before, complete and utter terror. "What's happening to them?" he whispered. "They see," Tahana replied softly, never breaking the rhythm of her chanting. "The spirits show them the truth of their own hearts, the weight of their crimes. Some men cannot bear such knowledge." Cole watched in fascination as one of Hawkins' men slowly turned his horse and rode back toward the entrance, his movements mechanical and dreamlike. A second man followed, then a third, leaving only Hawkins himself, staring into the sacred chamber with eyes that reflected a soul in torment. The bounty hunter's mouth moved as if he were trying to speak, but no sound emerged. His rifle trembled in his hands, but he seemed unable to raise it or pull the trigger. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool air of the chamber. Finally, Hawkins let out a sound that was part scream, part sob. He wheeled his horse around and fled, his hoofbeats echoing frantically as he disappeared into the slot canyon. "It is finished," the old man said, his ritual voice returning to normal speech. "They will not return to this place. The spirits have marked them, and they will carry that mark until they find the courage to face what they have become." Cole felt a strange tingling in his hands and looked down to see that Tahana had taken them in her own. Her skin seemed to glow with a faint inner light, and he could feel a warmth spreading up his arms and into his chest. "The binding is complete," she said, her dark eyes holding depths he had never noticed before. "We are spirit brother and spirit sister now, bound by choice and sacred ritual. Your strength is mine, and mine is yours until the end of our days." Cole looked into her face and saw not the desperate, frightened woman he had rescued, but someone transformed, a warrior, a medicine keeper, a person of power in her own right. And somehow through their shared bond, he felt some of that strength flowing into him as well. "What happens now?" he asked. The old man smiled and gestured toward the painted walls. "Now you learn what it truly means to be Apache. The spirits have accepted you both, but with acceptance comes responsibility. You must be worthy of the trust they have placed in you." As the afternoon sun slanted down through the opening far above, Cole found himself thinking about the choices that had brought him to this moment. A simple supply run had become something he never could have imagined. A spiritual awakening, a sacred bond, a complete transformation of everything he thought he knew about himself and the world around him. He looked at Tahana, his spirit sister, and saw his own wonder reflected in her eyes. They had entered this place as fugitives running from their enemies. They would leave as something entirely different, two souls bound together by ancient ritual and mutual choice, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the world beyond the painted walls. The old man began preparing for another ceremony, this one involving the sacred paintings themselves. Cole sensed that their time in this holy place was far from over, that there were lessons yet to be learned and bonds yet to be strengthened before they could return to the outside world. The old man's hands moved across the painted walls with reverent precision, his weathered fingers tracing symbols that seemed to pulse with life under his touch. Cole watched in fascination as the ancient Apache elder began what he called the ceremony of understanding, a ritual that would supposedly reveal the true meaning behind the sacred images. Each painting tells a story, the elder explained, his voice echoing softly in the cathedral-like chamber. But more than that, each story contains medicine power that can heal or harm depending on the heart of the one who receives it. Tahana knelt beside the sacred pool, her reflection shimmering in the crystalline water. The ritual binding had changed something fundamental in her bearing. She moved now with the confidence of someone who had found her true place in the world. "Tell me about this one grandfather," she said, pointing to a particularly striking image near the water's edge. It depicted a warrior and a woman standing together against what appeared to be a great storm, their hands joined, lightning crackling around them. The old man nodded approvingly. "Ah, you see with clear eyes, granddaughter. This is the story of two who are one, painted here by my own grandfather's grandfather. It speaks of a bond forged not in comfort, but in the fire of shared trials." Cole found himself drawn closer, studying the ancient artwork with new appreciation. The figures in the painting seemed familiar somehow, as if he were looking at a mirror that reflected not his physical form, but something deeper. "The warrior in this story was not born Apache," the elder continued. "He came from the enemy people, but the spirits saw something in his heart that even he did not recognize. When the time of testing came, he chose honor over safety, truth over comfort." "What happened to them?" Cole asked, surprised by his own intense interest in the answer. "They were transformed by their choice to stand together. The storm that should have destroyed them became the source of their power. They learned that some bonds transcend the boundaries of blood and tribe, that true kinship is forged in the crucible of shared sacrifice." The parallel to his own situation with Tahana was impossible to ignore. Cole felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the elder wasn't just telling an ancient story, he was providing a roadmap for their own journey. "The spirits speak through you, grandfather," Tahana said softly. "But what of the trials still to come? The binding ceremony has made us spirit siblings, but the world beyond this sacred place will not recognize such bonds. How do we live this truth among people who see only the color of our skin?" The old man's expression grew grave. "That is the hardest test of all, granddaughter. It is one thing to stand together against enemies who attack with weapons. It is another to stand together against those who attack with words, with laws, with the weight of custom and prejudice." He moved to another section of the painted wall where images depicted what appeared to be a great exodus, people of different tribes traveling together across a vast landscape. "There was a time long ago when such things were possible," he said, "when the strength of a person's spirit mattered more than the circumstances of their birth. But those days have passed, and now we live in an age of smaller hearts and narrower minds." Cole studied the Exodus painting, noting details that spoke of both hardship and hope. Are you saying it's impossible that what we've chosen here can't survive in the outside world? Not impossible, the elder replied, but costly. You will both pay prices you cannot yet imagine. The question is whether the bond you have forged is strong enough to bear that weight. As if summoned by his words, a new sound echoed through the chamber, not the hoofbeats of pursuit this time, but something different. Voices speaking in Apache growing steadily closer. Tahana tensed her hand, moving instinctively to the knife at her belt. "My people," she said. "A hunting party, perhaps, or warriors who have heard that the sacred place has been violated by a white eyes," the old man finished calmly. "Yes, I expected this. Word travels quickly on the desert wind." Cole felt his stomach tighten. They had escaped Hawkins and his hired killers only to face a potentially more dangerous threat. Apache warriors defending their holy ground would show no mercy to a white intruder, regardless of any spirit-binding ceremonies. "What do we do?" he asked. The elder smiled, but there was sadness in his ancient eyes. "We face the truth as the spirits demand. You have been bound by sacred ritual, but now that binding must be tested by those who live in the world of flesh and blood." The voices were closer now, and Cole could make out individual words even though he didn't understand their meaning. There was anger in those voices and something that might have been outrage. "They know I'm here," he said grimly. "They can smell white man on me from a mile away." "It is not your scent they detect," Tahana said, moving to stand beside him. "It is your fear. My people can sense the spirit of a person just as your people can sense the weather. If you stand here radiating terror and guilt, they will respond accordingly. And if I don't, then we find out how strong our bond truly is." The first Apache warrior appeared at the entrance to the chamber like a ghost materializing from shadow. He was young, perhaps 25, with the lean build and alert eyes of a natural fighter. His face was painted for war, and he carried a rifle with the easy familiarity of someone who had used it many times. Behind him came 3 more warriors, each armed and ready for battle. They fanned out across the entrance, effectively blocking any escape route, their eyes fixed on Cole with the intensity of predators evaluating prey. The young leader spoke rapidly in Apache, his tone sharp with accusation. Cole couldn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear enough. Tahana stepped forward, placing herself between Cole and the warriors. Her response was equally rapid and passionate, her voice carrying the authority of someone speaking absolute truth. The exchange continued for several minutes, growing more heated with each statement. Cole found himself studying the faces of the warriors, trying to read their intentions. The leader's expression was growing darker by the moment, while one of the others had begun fingering his rifle trigger with obvious anticipation. Finally, the old man spoke. His voice cut through the argument like a blade through silk, commanding instant attention and respect. The warriors turned toward him with expressions of surprise and deference. Clearly, they hadn't noticed his presence until that moment. What followed was a long, complex conversation conducted entirely in Apache. Cole caught occasional glimpses of meaning from gestures and tone, but mostly he could only wait and hope that Tahana and the elder were making a convincing case for his continued existence. The sun had moved perceptibly across the opening above before the conversation finally ended. The young war leader stood silent for a long moment, his dark eyes moving between Cole Tahana and the sacred paintings that surrounded them. When he finally spoke again, his tone had changed completely. Instead of anger, Cole heard something that might have been curiosity or even respect. "What did you tell them?" Cole asked quietly. "The truth," Tahana replied, "that you saved my life at great risk to your own, that you chose to stand with me against our mutual enemies, that the spirits themselves have accepted you through the binding ceremony." The war leader approached Cole directly, stopping just out of arm's reach. Up close, his youth was even more apparent. He couldn't have been much older than Tahana herself, but his eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much violence, too much loss. "You are the one called Maddox," he said in careful English. "Your name is known among my people." Cole felt his blood turn to ice. "Known for what? 3 winters past you rode with the soldiers who attacked our camp at Willow Creek. 7 of our people died that day, including 2 children. The words hit Cole like physical blows. He remembered Willow Creek, a dawn raid based on reports of Apache raiders. They had found women, children, and old men in the camp, but no warriors. The engagement had lasted less than 10 minutes, but the memory of it had haunted his dreams ever since. "I remember," Cole said simply. "I was following orders, but that's no excuse. Those people didn't deserve what happened to them." "One of the children who died was my brother," the young warrior continued. "He was 8 years old. His name was Little Fox, and he wanted to grow up to be a great hunter, like our father." Cole closed his eyes, feeling the weight of old guilt pressing down on him like a mountain. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't bring him back, doesn't change what happened, but I am truly sorry." The warrior studied his face intently, as if searching for signs of deception. "You could have denied it, could have claimed you were not part of the killing. Why do you speak truth that could cost you your life?" "Because lies won't honor your brother's memory," Cole replied, "and because if I'm going to die here, I want it to be for the truth, not for a comfortable fiction." Something shifted in the young Apache's expression. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. He turned to speak with his companions in rapid Apache, their conversation intense but no longer hostile. The old man approached Cole during this conference, his weathered face showing approval. "You have chosen well, White Eyes. Truth is the only foundation upon which real healing can be built." "Will it be enough?" Cole asked. "That remains to be seen, but you have given them something to consider besides their anger." The war leader returned, his decision apparently made. "I am called Swift Arrow," he said formally, "son of Gray Eagle, brother to Little Fox, who walks now in the spirit world. The old grandfather tells us you have been bound to our sister Tahana through the sacred ceremony. This is a thing we have never seen before, a White Eyes accepted into the family of the people." "It's new to me too," Cole admitted. Swift Arrow almost smiled at that. "The spirits, it seems, enjoy surprising us all. Very well. You will be tested, as all who claim kinship with the Apache must be tested. If you prove worthy, you will be accepted as brother. If you fail—" He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. "What kind of test?" Tahana asked, her voice tight with concern. "The test of the painted walls," the old man answered before Swift Arrow could respond. "He must spend the night alone in the sacred chamber without food or water while the spirits judge his heart. If he survives until dawn with his sanity intact, the ancestors will have spoken their verdict." Cole felt his throat go dry. He had heard stories of such vision quests, how they could drive men mad with terrifying revelations or impossible choices, but he also understood that this was likely the only path to acceptance, not just by these warriors, but by Tahana's people as a whole. "I accept," he said without hesitation. Tahana grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with alarm. "Cole, you don't understand what you're agreeing to. The test of the painted walls, it's not just about staying awake all night. The spirits will show you things, force you to confront every dark corner of your soul. Strong men have emerged from such tests, broken in mind and spirit." "Then I guess we'll find out how strong I really am." Swift Arrow nodded approvingly. "Spoken like a warrior. We will return at dawn to see what the spirits have decided." As the Apache warriors prepared to leave, the old man gathered his few belongings and approached Cole one final time. "Remember, White Eyes, the spirits do not test us to destroy us, but to teach us who we truly are. Do not fight the visions that come, embrace them, learn from them. Only by facing the darkness in your past can you step into the light of your future." Tahana was the last to go. She stood close to Cole, her dark eyes searching his face, as if trying to memorize every detail. "This is not what I wanted," she whispered. I thought the binding ceremony would be enough, that we could simply be spirit siblings without all these complications. Nothing worthwhile is ever simple, Cole replied, reaching out to touch her cheek gently. Besides, didn't your grandmother say that sometimes the spirits place us exactly where we need to be? Yes, but that doesn't make it easier to watch someone you care about face such danger alone. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to explore fully. Cole felt something warm unfold in his chest, not just the spiritual bond they had forged through ceremony, but something deeper and more personal. I won't be alone, he said softly. I'll carry part of you with me. Remember, that's what the binding means. Your strength becomes mine. Tahana stepped closer, placing her hand over his heart. And yours becomes mine. So if you die in there, you take part of me with you. Then I guess I better survive. She smiled through tears she was clearly trying not to shed. You had better. I have not gone through all this trouble to find a spirit brother only to lose him to his own stubborn pride. After they had gone, Cole found himself alone in the sacred chamber as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The painted walls seemed to pulse with life in the changing light, and he could swear he heard whispers echoing from the ancient images, voices speaking in languages he didn't recognize but somehow understood. He settled himself beside the sacred pool, his back against a smooth section of rock wall. The water reflected the darkening sky above, creating the illusion that he was suspended between two infinite spaces. As twilight deepened into true darkness, the chamber began to transform around him. The painted figures seemed to move in his peripheral vision, stepping down from the walls to walk among the shadows. Cole forced himself to remain calm, remembering the old man's advice about embracing rather than fighting the visions. The first spirit to approach him was a warrior he recognized from the Exodus painting, a tall figure with eyes like burning coals and a face marked by countless battles. You carry the blood of my people on your hands, the spirit said, its voice echoing as if from a great distance. The children of Willow Creek cry out for justice. What answer do you give? Cole met the spirit's burning gaze directly. I give no excuse, make no justification. I was part of something evil that day, and I have carried the weight of it ever since. If justice demands my life, I offer it freely. The warrior spirit studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You speak truth, but truth alone does not wash away blood. What have you done to balance the scales? The question pierced Cole to his core. What had he done? He had left the army, tried to live quietly, avoided causing further harm, but was that enough? Was passive regret sufficient payment for active participation in massacre? I saved Tahana, he said finally. I chose to protect rather than exploit, to stand with rather than against. It doesn't bring back the dead, but it's something. Yes, the spirit agreed. It is something, but is it enough? Before Cole could answer, the spirit faded back into the painted wall, leaving him alone with the question echoing in his mind. As the night deepened, more spirits emerged from the ancient artwork. Some spoke to him of courage, others of cowardice. Some showed him possible futures paths, where he and Tahana lived in peace, others where their bond led only to tragedy and loss. The most disturbing vision came near midnight, when a spirit wearing the face of his former commanding officer appeared. You've gone native Maddox, the spirit said with cold disgust, throwing your lot in with savages betraying your own kind. What would your father think if he could see you now? The question cut deep because Cole had asked it himself many times. His father had been a career soldier, a man who believed absolutely in the righteousness of American expansion and the superiority of white civilization. He had died still believing his son would carry on the family tradition of military service. My father was wrong about a lot of things, Cole said aloud, surprised by the strength in his own voice. He saw the world in simple terms, us versus them, civilized versus savage. But the world isn't simple, and neither are people. The spirit officer sneered. Philosophical nonsense. You're betraying everything you were raised to believe. No, Cole replied with growing conviction. I'm finally becoming the man my father thought he was raising, someone who stands up for what's right, regardless of the cost. As dawn approached, the visions became more intense and personal. He saw his own death in a dozen different ways, shot by Apache warriors, hanged by white settlers, dying alone and forgotten in the desert. But he also saw other possibilities. A life lived with purpose and honor, children who might carry the best of both worlds in their blood, a future where the bonds between peoples were stronger than the barriers that divided them. When the first rays of sunlight slanted down through the chamber's opening, Cole was still sitting beside the sacred pool, exhausted but intact. The painted walls had returned to their normal stillness, but he felt fundamentally changed by his night among the spirits. Swift Arrow and his warriors arrived as promised, accompanied by Tahana and the old man. They approached cautiously, studying Cole's face for signs of madness or spiritual damage. Well, Swift Arrow asked simply. Cole rose slowly to his feet, his muscles stiff from the long night. I understand now, he said. The spirits didn't test me to see if I was worthy of being Apache. They tested me to see if I was worthy of being human. The young war leader exchanged glances with his companions, then looked to the old man for guidance. Speak what you learned, the elder commanded. Cole looked around the circle of faces, Apache warriors who had every reason to hate him, an old man who had shown him kindness despite his past, and Tahana, whose trust he had somehow earned despite the blood on his hands. I learned that carrying guilt isn't the same as seeking redemption, he began. That feeling sorry for past wrongs means nothing if you don't try to do better going forward. I learned that true kinship isn't about blood or tribe, it's about choosing to stand with others when it matters most. He paused, gathering his thoughts. And I learned that the spirits don't judge us by where we come from, but by where we choose to go. Swift Arrow was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching Cole's face. Finally, he stepped forward and placed his hand on Cole's shoulder. The test is completed, he announced formally. The spirits have spoken through you, and their message is clear. You are no longer Cole Maddox, the White Soldier. From this day forward, you are Ghost Walker brother to the Apache keeper of the sacred bond. Tahana's face lit up with relief and joy. She stepped forward and embraced him, and Cole felt the last of his old identity fall away like a discarded skin. He was no longer running from his past. He was walking toward a future he had chosen. But even as they celebrated his acceptance into the Apache family, Cole couldn't shake the feeling that their real trials were just beginning. The sacred chamber had offered them sanctuary and transformation, but the world beyond these painted walls would demand something even more challenging: the courage to live their truth in a society determined to destroy it. The morning sun cast long shadows across the desert floor as the small group emerged from the sacred chamber, but Cole, now Ghost Walker, could feel the weight of watching eyes from every ridge and outcropping. Swift Arrow had accepted him as brother, but acceptance by one warrior did not guarantee safety among all Apache bands, especially not when word spread that a white man had been granted sacred status. We cannot linger here, Swift Arrow said quietly, his gaze scanning the horizon with practiced wariness. Other hunting parties roam these lands, and not all will be as willing to listen to explanations as my warriors were. Tahana moved to Cole's side, her presence both comforting and reassuring. The spiritual bond forged in the painted chamber felt stronger now, more tangible, as if they truly had become two parts of a single whole. Where can we go? She asked. The white settlements will not welcome a white man who has chosen Apache ways, and your people may not all accept what has happened here. The old man, who had been silent during their preparations to leave, finally spoke. There is a place, he said slowly, far to the west in the hidden valleys where the ancient ones once dwelled, My grandfather spoke of it as sanctuary where people of different tribes lived together in the old way before the coming of the horse soldiers and their treaties. Swift Arrow's eyes narrowed with interest. The Valley of Three Waters. I thought that was only legend. Many things are called legend until they are needed, the elder replied cryptically. The path is dangerous and not all who seek it find it. But for those whose hearts are true, it offers something the outside world cannot, the chance to live, without choosing between two incompatible truths. Cole felt something stir in his chest, hope perhaps, or simply the desire to believe that such a place could exist. How far? 20 days hard riding through country, controlled by neither white nor Apache. There are others there, Mexicans fleeing the revolution's Navajo, who refuse reservation life, whites who have rejected their own people's madness. If it still exists, it would be a place where Ghostwalker and his spirit sister could make a life together. The idea seemed almost too good to be true, which made Cole immediately suspicious. In his experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. "What's the catch?" he asked bluntly. The old man smiled approvingly. "Wisdom born of hard experience. The catch, as you call it, is this. The valley accepts only those who come seeking sanctuary for the right reasons. Those who arrive carrying hatred, greed, or the desire to impose their will on others find only death in the desert approaches." "And how does the valley judge a person's reasons?" Tahana asked. "The spirits that guard it know the truth of a human heart better than the person themselves sometimes knows it. You will face tests along the way, not visions like those in the painted chamber, but real trials that will reveal who you truly are." Swift Arrow stepped forward, his decision clearly made. "I will guide you to the beginning of the path. Beyond that, you must find your own way." Cole felt a surge of gratitude toward the young warrior who had every reason to hate him. Why risk yourself for people you barely know? Swift Arrow was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "Because my brother Little Fox used to have dreams about a time when Apache children and white children could play together without fear. He said the spirits showed him visions of a world where people were judged by their actions, not their blood. If such a place as the Valley of Three Waters truly exists, perhaps his dreams were not just the imaginings of a child." The mention of the boy who had died at Willow Creek hit Cole like a physical blow. 3 years had passed, but the guilt remained as sharp as ever. Now, however, it was accompanied by something else, a determination to honor that child's memory by proving his dreams weren't impossible. They gathered their few belongings and prepared to leave the sacred chamber behind. Cole took one last look at the painted walls, knowing he would probably never see them again. The ancient images seemed to shimmer in the morning light, as if the spirits were offering their blessing for the journey ahead. As they rode away from the holy place, Cole found himself thinking about the transformation he had undergone. Less than a week ago, he had been Cole Maddox, a simple freight guard trying to live quietly in the shadow of his past. Now he was Ghostwalker's spirit brother to an Apache woman accepted by warriors who should have been his enemies, riding toward a destination that might be nothing more than legend. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to save Tahana from captivity, he had found his own freedom from the guilt and self-hatred that had been eating away at him for years. They traveled west for 3 days without incident, following game trails and ancient paths known only to the Apache. Swift Arrow led them through country so desolate that Cole wondered how anyone could survive there, yet his Apache companions moved through it as easily as if they were walking through a garden. On the 4th day, they encountered their first real test. They had stopped at a waterhole hidden among a jumble of red sandstone boulders, when Swift Arrow suddenly raised his hand for silence. His head was tilted, listening to something only his trained ears could detect. "Riders," he whispered. "Coming from the south, white men, maybe 6 or 7 of them." Cole felt his blood run cold. "Hawkins, maybe, or cavalry patrol, does it matter?" The question was valid. Either option meant trouble for their small group. Cole checked his rifle and counted his remaining ammunition, while Tahana did the same with her weapons. "There's cover in the rocks above the waterhole," Swift Arrow observed. "We could fort up there, make them pay dearly for any attack. Or we could try to avoid a fight altogether," Cole suggested. "I'm tired of solving problems with bullets." Swift Arrow looked at him with something that might have been respect. "Spoken like a true Apache. We fight only when we must, never when we merely can." They led their horses into concealment among the boulders and waited. The approaching riders made no effort to hide their presence. Their voices carried clearly across the desert air, along with the jingle of cavalry equipment and the creak of leather. "Definitely soldiers," Cole whispered, recognizing the sounds from his own military service. As the patrol drew closer, Cole could make out their conversation. They were discussing Apache sign, debating whether to follow various tracks they had found. One voice, however, made Cole's stomach clench with dread. Hawkins apparently recovered from his wound and now riding with the cavalry as a civilian guide. "The tracks lead toward the sacred canyon," Hawkins was saying. "If we can catch them there, we'll have them trapped." A different voice, carrying the authority of command, replied, "Mr. Hawkins, I appreciate your assistance, but I won't order my men into that particular canyon. The Apaches consider it holy ground, and violating it would only create more hostility. Captain Morrison, with all due respect, we're hunting a dangerous renegade and his Apache accomplice. They killed Sean Murphy in cold blood, stole his property, and made fools of territorial law. Are you really going to let superstition stop you from bringing them to justice?" Cole felt Tahana tense beside him. The twisted version of events Hawkins was peddling made them sound like common criminals rather than people fighting for their freedom. "The man you're hunting, this Cole Maddox, he was a good soldier once," Captain Morrison replied. "I served with him at Fort Union. Something must have driven him to this. I'd like to hear his side of the story before I pass judgment." "His side?" Hawkins' voice rose with outrage. "Captain, the man's gone native. He's probably been feeding information to hostile bands, maybe even participating in raids. You can't trust anything he might tell you." Swift Arrow caught Cole's eye and made a subtle gesture toward his rifle. The young warrior was asking if Cole wanted him to eliminate Hawkins with a single shot. It would be easy from their concealed position. Cole shook his head firmly. Killing Hawkins would only confirm the story the bounty hunter was telling, making them the outlaws he claimed they already were. The patrol moved past their hiding place without discovering them, but Cole knew they weren't safe. Hawkins would keep searching, keep spreading his version of events, until every soldier and lawman in the territory was looking for the renegade Cole Maddox and his Apache accomplice. "We need to reach the valley quickly," he told Swift Arrow once the soldiers were safely gone. "Every day we spend in the open increases the chance of being caught." Swift Arrow nodded grimly. "I will take you to the beginning of the hidden path tomorrow. Beyond that, you must trust in the spirits and your own courage." That night, as they camped in a sheltered arroyo, with no fire to betray their position, Tahana spoke the words that had been weighing on both their hearts. "There is no going back now," she said quietly. "Even if we wanted to return to our old lives, Hawkins has made that impossible. We are truly outlaws now, wanted by both Apache and white law." Cole looked up at the stars wheeling overhead in their eternal patterns. "Maybe that's what we needed to become," he said. "Maybe this is the only way we could find out who we really are." "And who are we, Ghost Walker?" The Apache name still felt strange on his tongue, but also somehow right, as if he had been waiting his whole life to claim it. "We're people who chose each other over the expectations of our tribes," he said. "People who decided that love and honor matter more than the color of our skin or the circumstances of our birth." Tahana moved closer, her warmth a comfort against the desert's night chill. "Love?" she asked softly. The word had slipped out without conscious thought, but Cole realized it was true. Somewhere between the moment he had first seen her, huddled in Murphy's back room, and now sitting under the desert stars as fugitives from two different worlds. He had fallen in love with her. Not just with her beauty or her courage, but with the fundamental strength of spirit that had carried her through captivity and transformation. "Yes," he said simply. "Love." She was quiet for so long that he began to worry he had spoken too soon, revealed too much of his heart before she was ready to hear it. Finally she spoke. "Among my people there is a word, inaji, that means the one who completes. It is what a person calls their true mate, the other half of their soul. I thought such things were stories told to children, until I met you." She turned to face him directly, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "You are my Inaji ghost walker. You have been since the moment you chose to help me rather than turn away." The words hit Cole with the force of a physical blow. He had spent his adult life believing he was broken, that the things he had done in the name of duty had made him unworthy of love or happiness. Yet here was this remarkable woman who had every reason to hate men like him, telling him he was the completion of her soul. "Tahana, She placed her fingers gently over his lips. "Do not speak. There will be time for words later. For now, let us simply be grateful that the spirits brought us together." They held each other under the star-drunk sky, two people who had found something precious in the most unlikely circumstances. Tomorrow they would continue their journey toward an uncertain destination, pursued by enemies who would show them no mercy if caught. But tonight they had each other, and that was enough. The next morning brought Swift Arrow's farewell. The young warrior led them to a narrow gap between two massive mesas, where ancient petroglyphs marked what he claimed was the beginning of the hidden path to the Valley of Three Waters. "From here you follow the symbols carved by the old ones," he explained, pointing to the faded rock art. "Each marker will lead you toward the next, but only if your intentions are pure. Those who come seeking the valley for selfish reasons find that the markers lead them in circles until they die of thirst or give up and turn back." Cole studied the petroglyphs, trying to make sense of their meaning. They seemed to depict a journey, stylized figures traveling through various landscapes, facing different challenges along the way. "What kind of challenges?" he asked. Swift Arrow's expression grew serious. "The trials that reveal the truth of a person's character. Greed, pride, fear, hatred, all of these will be tested. You must face them not as separate individuals, but as two parts of one spirit. Only together can you hope to find what you seek." He turned to Tahana, his voice formal with the weight of ceremony. "Sister, you carry the blood of our people, but you also carry something new, the possibility of a bridge between worlds. Do not forget who you are, but do not be afraid to become who you are meant to be." To Cole, he said simply, "Brother Ghost Walker, you have been given a great gift, the chance to redeem a lifetime of wrong choices with one right one. Do not waste it." With that, Swift Arrow mounted his horse and rode back the way they had come, leaving Cole and Tahana alone at the threshold of their greatest adventure. They followed the ancient path for 2 days without incident, the petroglyphs leading them deeper into country neither had ever seen before. The landscape gradually changed from desert to something more like high mountain terrain. Pine trees appeared along with streams of clear water and meadows where wildflowers bloomed despite the autumn season. On the 3rd day, they encountered their first test. The trail led to a deep canyon spanned by a natural rock bridge barely wide enough for a single horse. Far below, a river roared through the rocky gorge, its white water promising instant death to anyone unlucky enough to fall. But the bridge itself wasn't the problem. The problem was the man standing in its center. He was Mexican, perhaps 50 years old, with the weathered look of someone who had spent his life outdoors. His clothes were rough but clean, and he carried an ancient rifle with the confidence of someone who knew how to use it. "Hold there, amigos," he called out in accented English. "This bridge belongs to me now. You want to cross, you pay the toll." Cole felt his temper flare. They had come so far, overcome so much, only to be stopped by a common bandit, demanding payment they didn't have. "We don't have any money," he called back. The Mexican smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Then perhaps the señorita would like to discuss other forms of payment." The implication was clear, and Cole felt his hand move toward his gun. Beside him, Tahana tensed like a coiled spring, her own weapons within easy reach. But something about the situation felt wrong, too convenient, too perfectly positioned to test their reactions. Cole remembered Swift Arrow's warning about trials that revealed character. "Wait," he said quietly to Tahana. "Let me try something else first." He called out to the Mexican, "You look like a man who's traveled far to reach this place. What brought you here?" The bandit's expression shifted slightly, surprise replacing some of his aggressive confidence. "What does it matter to you, gringo? Because maybe we're not so different. Maybe we're all running from something, looking for something better." Cole stepped forward slowly, his hands visible and empty of weapons. "My name is Ghostwalker. This is my wife, Tahana. We're looking for the Valley of Three Waters, where people can live free of the hatred that poisons the outside world." The Mexican's rifle wavered slightly. "Wife, a white man married to an Apache. How is this possible?" "Because we chose each other over the expectations of our people," Tahana answered, moving to stand beside Cole. "Because we learned that the color of a person's skin matters less than the content of their heart." The bandit stared at them for a long moment, then slowly lowered his rifle. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its threatening edge. "My name is Carlos Mendoza. I was a captain in the army of Benito Juarez until the revolution failed and my men were slaughtered by federales. I came north seeking vengeance, but found only more death and suffering." He gestured toward the bridge. "For 3 months I have stopped travelers here taking what they carried, telling myself I was simply surviving. But in truth, I was trying to fill the emptiness inside me with their fear and their possessions." Cole felt understanding dawn. "And did it work?" Carlos laughed bitterly. "No, amigo. It only made the emptiness larger. Each person I robbed took away another piece of my soul until I began to wonder if there was anything left of the man I used to be." "There is," Tahana said with quiet conviction. "The man you used to be is still there, waiting for you to remember who he was." Carlos looked at her with something approaching wonder. "How can you be so certain, Señora?" "Because I see it in your eyes. You are not a bandit by nature. You are a soldier who has lost his cause. But perhaps there is a new cause waiting for you if you have the courage to seek it." The Mexican was quiet for a long time, staring out over the rushing river below. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the sound of the water. "The Valley of Three Waters. It is real. It is not just another broken promise." "We don't know," Cole admitted. "We're following the same hope. You are the same desperate need to believe that somewhere in this world there's a place where good people can live in peace." Carlos straightened his shoulders, and for a moment Cole could see the officer he had once been. "Then perhaps we should find out together. No 3 people seeking redemption might have better luck than 2. And so their small company grew by 1. Carlos proved to be an excellent guide and a skilled hunter, able to supplement their meager supplies with game taken along the trail. More importantly, his presence seemed to validate their quest. If the path to the valley could transform a bitter, broken revolutionist into a man of hope and purpose, perhaps it really did lead somewhere worth reaching. They traveled together for a week, following the ancient markers deeper into mountain country that seemed untouched by the conflicts raging in the outside world. Each day brought new tests: a river that had to be crossed despite having no obvious ford, a rock slide that blocked their path until they learned to work together to clear it, a pack of wolves that surrounded their camp until Carlos suggested they might be guardians rather than threats. In each case, the solution came not from individual strength or cunning, but from their willingness to trust and support each other. Cole began to understand that the trials weren't just testing their character, they were teaching them how to function as a true community. On the 8th day, they crested a ridge and saw their destination spread out before them. The Valley of Three Waters lay hidden between towering peaks, a green oasis that seemed to exist outside of normal geography. 3 streams converged at its heart, creating a lake so clear it perfectly reflected the sky above. Around the water's edge, Cole could see cultivated fields, grazing animals, and the smoke of cooking fires, rising from what appeared to be a substantial settlement. "Dios mío," Carlos whispered, "it is real." But as they began their descent toward the valley floor, Cole noticed something that made his heart race with equal parts hope and terror. People were emerging from the settlement, men and women of various races and backgrounds, all moving toward them with obvious purpose. They were either about to be welcomed into paradise, or they had just walked into the most elaborate trap in the history of the frontier. Either way, there was no turning back now. The delegation approaching from the valley settlement moved with deliberate purpose but without haste, their very composure suggesting people who had faced such moments many times before. Cole counted perhaps 20 individuals, men and women of various ages and ethnicities, their clothing a fascinating mixture of Apache buckskin, Mexican cotton, and frontier wool that spoke of cultures blending rather than merely coexisting. At their head walked a woman who immediately commanded attention, despite her modest appearance. She was perhaps 40 years old, with the bearing of natural authority and eyes that seemed to see straight through to a person's soul. Her skin suggested mixed heritage, possibly Spanish and Apache, and her graying hair was braided with silver ornaments that caught the afternoon light. "Welcome, travelers," she called out when the 2 groups were within comfortable speaking distance. "I am Elena Vasquez, one of the council members who help guide this community. We have been expecting you." Cole felt a chill run down his spine. "Expecting us?" Elena's smile held both warmth and mystery. "The guardians of the ancient path send word when seekers pass the trials successfully. We knew 3 souls were approaching, 2 bound by spirit law, 1 seeking redemption for past failures. The descriptions match what we see before us." Tahana stepped forward, her natural dignity evident despite their weeks on the trail. "I am Tahana of the Apache people, daughter of Standing Bear. This is Ghostwalker, my spirit brother and chosen mate. Our companion is Carlos Mendoza, who joined us seeking the same sanctuary we seek." Elena nodded approvingly. "Your true names carry power here, as do your intentions. But names and intentions must be tested against actions before sanctuary can be granted. Are you prepared for the final trial?" Carlos shifted nervously beside them. "What kind of trial, Senora?" "The trial of truthful living," Elena replied. "You must spend 7 days among us, working as part of our community, allowing us to see who you truly are when the masks of survival are no longer necessary. Some who pass the trials of the ancient path fail this final test. They discover that living in peace requires different strengths than living in conflict." Cole studied the faces surrounding them, looking for signs of hostility or deception, but finding only curious interest. These people had clearly learned to live together despite their different backgrounds, but that didn't necessarily mean they would welcome newcomers. "And if we fail this final trial," he asked, "then you leave as others have before you," Elena said simply. "But you leave with our blessing and our hope that you will find your place elsewhere. We do not punish failure, we simply cannot risk the community's safety by accepting those who are not ready for this way of life." It seemed fair enough, though Cole couldn't shake the feeling that there were complications they hadn't been told about yet. In his experience, communities that seemed too good to be true usually had darker secrets lurking beneath the surface. But Tahana was already nodding acceptance. "We understand. 7 days to prove ourselves worthy of sanctuary." "Then come," Elena said, gesturing toward the settlement. "Let us show you what we have built together." As they walked toward the heart of the valley, Cole was struck by the evidence of careful planning and cooperation everywhere he looked. The fields were laid out in an intricate pattern that maximized both productivity and beauty, with irrigation channels that seemed to follow the natural contours of the land. Gardens mixed vegetables with flowers, creating spaces that fed both body and spirit. The buildings themselves were equally impressive, a blend of architectural styles that somehow worked together harmoniously. Adobe structures in the Mexican tradition stood beside Apache-style brush shelters and frontier log cabins, all connected by covered walkways that provided protection from weather while encouraging social interaction. "How many people live here?" Tahana asked. "About 200 at present," Elena replied. "We grow slowly, accepting only those who truly seek what we offer. Rapid growth would destroy the delicate balance we have worked so hard to achieve." They passed workshops where craftsmen of different traditions worked side by side, sharing techniques and creating items that combined the best of various cultures. A Navajo weaver worked at a loom while discussing patterns with a Mexican woman spinning wool. A white blacksmith forged horseshoes while an Apache elder taught a group of children how to fletch arrows with traditional techniques. "It's remarkable," Cole said, and meant it. "How did it begin?" Elena's expression grew thoughtful. "With desperate people who discovered that their shared humanity was stronger than their inherited hatreds. The first families arrived here about 15 years ago. Apache fleeing reservation life, Mexicans escaping revolution whites who had grown disgusted with their own people's cruelty. At first, they simply tolerated each other out of necessity. But over time, tolerance became cooperation, cooperation became community, and community became family. They reached the central area of the settlement, where a large communal space surrounded the lake, formed by the convergence of the three streams. Here, the evening meal was being prepared by our people working together with the easy rhythm of long practice. Children of various backgrounds played together without apparent awareness of their differences, while adults discussed the day's work and tomorrow's plans. "There are rules here," Elena continued as they found seats on wooden benches arranged around the communal fire. "Not many, but they are absolute. No violence against any member of the community. No theft of property or trust. No discrimination based on race, origin, or past mistakes. And above all, no bringing the hatreds of the outside world into our sanctuary." Carlos looked uncomfortable. "And what if someone breaks these rules?" "Then they leave," Elena said firmly. "We have learned that tolerance for intolerance destroys communities faster than external threats. Better to be small and harmonious than large and conflicted." As if to demonstrate her point, a commotion erupted near one of the workshops. Two men, one white, one Mexican, were engaged in a heated argument about the proper way to repair a wagon wheel. Their voices rose quickly, and Cole tensed, expecting violence to follow. Instead, an older Apache man approached the arguing pair and spoke quietly to them. Cole couldn't hear the words, but he could see their effect. The two men's postures changed from aggressive to ashamed. They spoke briefly to each other, then returned to their work with obvious effort to cooperate rather than compete. "Impressive," Cole admitted. "But what happens when the real tests come, when outside pressures threaten the community?" Elena's expression darkened slightly. "Those tests have come before, and they will come again. 3 years ago, a cavalry unit tried to force us to return Apache residents to the reservation. 2 years before that, Mexican federales demanded we surrender revolutionaries they claimed were hiding here. What did you do?" "We stood together," she said simply. "All of us, Apache, Mexican, white, and mixed blood, as one people defending our chosen family. The outside world has great power, but it also has great weaknesses. Its hatreds make it predictable, and its divisions make it vulnerable to people who have truly learned to work together." As the evening progressed, Cole found himself drawn into conversations that revealed the depth of thought that had gone into creating this community. These weren't naive idealists. dreaming of impossible utopias. They were practical people who had found ways to make different cultures and viewpoints work together for mutual benefit. A former cavalry officer named Thomas Mitchell spoke knowledgeably about defensive strategies, while preparing cornbread with an elderly Apache woman named Maria Crow Feather. A Mexican revolutionary named Juan Elizondo discussed crop rotation techniques with a white farmer's daughter called Sarah McDonnell, their conversation switching fluidly between English and Spanish. The secret, Sarah explained to Cole when he commented on the linguistic flexibility, is that we all had to become students again. You can't maintain the prejudices of your birth culture when you're dependent on someone from another culture to teach you essential skills. As the night deepened and the communal meal concluded, Elena approached their small group with an announcement that would shape their next week. "Tomorrow you begin your trial period," she said. "Ghost Walker, you will work with our hunters and scouts, learning how we feed and protect the community. Tahana, you will join our healers and teachers, sharing your knowledge of Apache medicine while learning our ways. Carlos, you will work with our craftsmen and builders, helping to maintain and improve our settlement." Cole felt a flutter of concern. "You're separating us." "Temporarily, yes. Part of the trial is learning whether you can function as individuals within the community structure, not just as a bonded group. Those who can only succeed when supported by their closest companions often struggle to integrate fully with a larger community." It made sense, but Cole still didn't like it. He and Tahana had been through so much together that the thought of facing challenges separately felt like deliberately weakening themselves. Tahana seemed to read his thoughts. "We are spirit bonded," she reminded him quietly. "Distance cannot change that. If anything, this will prove the strength of what we have built together." Their first night in the valley was spent in a guest lodge designed for newcomers, simple but comfortable accommodations that provided privacy while keeping them somewhat apart from the permanent residents. As they settled down to sleep on real beds for the first time in weeks, Cole found himself reflecting on how far they had come from that moment in Murphy's trading post. "Do you think we can make this work?" he asked Tahana in the darkness. "I think we must," she replied. "Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who dreams of a world where people like us can exist without having to choose between two incompatible truths." The next morning brought their first full day as trial members of the community. Cole was assigned to work with a mixed team of hunters and scouts, led by Thomas Mitchell, the former cavalry officer. Their task was to patrol the outer approaches to the valley, watching for signs of outside threats, while hunting game to supplement the community's food stores. "The work is important," Thomas explained as they saddled horses in the pre-dawn darkness, "but it's also a test of your judgment and discretion. We encounter outside travelers regularly. Some are potential threats, others are potential new members. Learning to tell the difference is crucial." Cole found himself working alongside two Apache scouts, a Mexican vaquero and a white frontiersman who claimed to have been a Texas Ranger before growing disgusted with the brutality expected of his position. Their diverse backgrounds created a fascinating blend of tracking skills and tactical knowledge. "The key to successful scouting here," explained one of the Apache scouts, "a man called Painted Horse is learning to think like our enemies while acting like our friends. We must be prepared for war, but hope for peace." They spent the morning following game trails and checking hidden observation points that provided early warning of approaching groups. Cole was impressed by the thoroughness of the defensive preparations. This community might preach peace, but they were clearly ready to defend themselves if necessary. Around midday, they encountered their first test. Smoke signals from a distant ridge announced the approach of a group of travelers from the south location, and number but not identity or intentions. 6 riders, Thomas interpreted from the coded signals, moving slowly, possibly burdened with supplies or wounded. Could be refugees, could be a scouting party trying to appear innocent. They positioned themselves to observe the approaching group without being seen, using natural cover and camouflage techniques that blended Apache stealth with military precision. What they saw made Cole's blood run cold. The riders were indeed 6 in number, led by a figure he recognized all too well. Jake Hawkins apparently recovered from his wound and more determined than ever to complete his pursuit. The bounty hunter had somehow managed to follow their trail all the way to the valley approaches. "We need to warn the community," Cole said grimly. Thomas shook his head. "First, we need to understand what they know and what they intend. If we simply drive them off, they'll return with larger forces. Better to deal with the threat decisively." Cole felt his heart hammering as he watched Hawkins and his men study the ground for tracks. The bounty hunter had always been skilled at following trails, but the ancient path's protection should have confused anyone who wasn't seeking the valley for the right reasons. Yet here he was, apparently having found some way to bypass or overcome those spiritual safeguards. "How is this possible?" Cole whispered to Painted Horse. "The path is supposed to mislead those with evil intentions." The Apache scout's expression was troubled. "The old protections are strong, but they are not perfect. Someone with enough hatred and determination can sometimes force their way through, though it costs them dearly. Look at your enemy's face. See how the spiritual resistance has marked him." Cole studied Hawkins through the spyglass Thomas had handed him and saw what Painted Horse meant. The bounty hunter's features were drawn and haggard, his eyes holding a wild intensity that spoke of a man pushed to the edge of madness by the trials he had endured. "He's not going to give up," Cole realized. "He's gone too far, sacrificed too much to turn back now." "Then we end this," Thomas said grimly. "But we do it right, no unnecessary killing, no martyrs, to inspire further pursuit." They shadowed Hawkins' group for the rest of the afternoon, gathering intelligence about their capabilities and intentions. The bounty hunter had recruited what appeared to be professional manhunters' men who tracked fugitives for money rather than justice. They were well armed and experienced, but they were also mercenaries who would abandon the hunt if it became too costly. As evening approached, Thomas made the decision to act. "We take them tonight when they're camped and relaxed. Surprise and superior positioning should let us end this without bloodshed." But Cole had a different idea, one that might solve their problem more permanently. "What if I went to them openly, surrendered myself in exchange for them leaving the valley alone?" Thomas stared at him as if he had suggested jumping off a cliff. "That's suicide. You know what Hawkins will do to you." "Maybe, but it might also be the only way to protect everyone else. If I'm not here, there's no reason for him to threaten the community." "No," Painted Horse said firmly. "You think like a white man, still one person sacrificing himself for the group. But you are part of the group now, and the group does not abandon its members." Before Cole could argue further, a new voice joined the conversation, Elena Vasquez, who had apparently followed them from the settlement. "The council has made its decision," she announced quietly. "This threat must be ended, but not through surrender or individual sacrifice. Tonight, these men will learn what it means to threaten a united community." Cole felt a chill at the steel in her voice. "What are you planning?" "Justice," Elena replied simply. "But justice tempered with mercy, as befits a community that seeks to rise above the brutalities of the outside world." As darkness fell over the valley, Cole found himself part of a carefully orchestrated operation that demonstrated just how effectively the settlement's diverse population could work together when threatened. Apache stealth techniques. Mexican guerrilla tactics and military precision combined to create a plan that would neutralize Hawkins' threat while minimizing the risk of bloodshed. The bounty hunters had made their camp in a defensible position among some rocks, clearly expecting possible pursuit, but they had no experience dealing with the kind of coordinated effort the valley community could mount. At Elena's signal, the operation began. First, their horses were quietly led away, eliminating any possibility of escape. Then their weapons were systematically removed by Apache scouts who could move like ghosts through the darkness. Finally, when Hawkins and his men were effectively helpless torches blazed to life around their position, they found themselves surrounded by what appeared to be an army, dozens of armed men and women who had emerged from the darkness with military precision. But what made the scene truly intimidating was the diversity of the force arrayed against them. Apache warriors stood beside Mexican vaqueros, white frontiersmen, next to mixed-blood scouts, all united in purpose and clearly prepared to defend their community. "Jake Hawkins," Elena called out, her voice carrying absolute authority, "you have violated sacred ground and threatened innocent people in your obsessive pursuit of personal vengeance. You will answer for these crimes." Hawkins looked around at the circle of armed figures, his wild eyes reflecting the torchlight. "I'm a lawfully appointed bounty hunter pursuing dangerous fugitives," he shouted. "You're interfering with territorial justice." "You are a slave trader and murderer," Elena replied calmly. "Your lawful authority extends only as far as men with similar hearts will support it. Here you have no authority at all." Cole stepped forward into the torchlight, knowing this was his moment to face the past that had been pursuing him. "This ends here, Hawkins. I'm the one you want. Leave these people out of it." Hawkins' face twisted with rage and something that might have been relief. Finally, the great Cole Maddox gone native and hiding behind savages and greasers. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me? The money, the reputation, the what?" Cole interrupted. "The right to buy and sell human beings, the privilege of destroying lives for profit. I'm sorry if my conscience has been inconvenient for you." "Conscience?" Hawkins laughed bitterly. "You killed Murphy. You stole property that was legally purchased." "I helped a human being escape from slavery," Cole corrected, "and I killed Murphy in self-defense when he tried to murder both of us." Tahana appeared at the edge of the torchlight, and Cole felt the spiritual bond between them pulse with strength. She had completed her first day's trial successfully and had come to stand with him for whatever judgment awaited. "The woman belongs to me by right of capture," Hawkins snarled. "Apache law, territorial law, it doesn't matter, she's property and you stole her." "I belong to no one but myself," Tahana said clearly. "And I choose to belong with Ghostwalker, my spirit brother and husband. Your law has no power over my free will." Elena stepped forward, and Cole could see that the moment of judgment had arrived. "Jake Hawkins, you have been weighed in the balance of justice and found wanting. Your crimes against the innocent, your trafficking in human misery, your violation of sacred ground, all of these demand answer." "You can't touch me," Hawkins screamed. "I'm a white man operating under territorial authority. There'll be consequences if you—" "The only consequences will be for you," Elena interrupted. "You have three choices. First, you can face trial by combat with any member of this community you have wronged, and there are many who would volunteer. Second, you can be taken to the territorial authorities with a full accounting of your crimes, including testimony from your surviving victims. Or third, you can accept exile. You and your men will be escorted beyond our borders and warned never to return." Cole felt a surge of admiration for Elena's wisdom. She was offering Hawkins a way out that preserved the community's principles while ensuring their safety. But the bounty hunter's madness had progressed too far for rational choice. "I'll see you all burn before I accept anything from a pack of mongrels and savages." He lunged for a weapon that was no longer there, his desperate movements triggering a swift response from the surrounding guards. In seconds, he was pinned to the ground by half a dozen hands, his struggles futile against their combined strength. "Exile it is," Elena said sadly, "though I suspect his hatred will eventually destroy him regardless." As dawn broke over the valley, Hawkins and his surviving men were escorted to the borders of the protected territory with warning never to return. Cole watched them go with mixed feelings, relief that the immediate threat was ended, but also sadness that it had come to this. "You did well," Elena told him as the last of the bounty hunters disappeared into the distance. "You faced your past without flinching and chose the community's welfare over personal vengeance. That speaks well for your integration into our society." The remaining days of their trial period passed more peacefully. Cole learned to work effectively with hunters from different traditions, discovering that his cavalry training complemented Apache stealth techniques and Mexican tracking skills in unexpected ways. Tahana proved equally adaptable, her knowledge of traditional medicine blending seamlessly with healing practices from other cultures. Carlos, meanwhile, had found his calling working with the community's builders and craftsmen. His military engineering experience, combined with his natural skill with tools, made him invaluable in maintaining and improving the settlement's infrastructure. On the 7th day, they were summoned before the full community council for final judgment. Cole felt nervous despite the apparent success of their integration. He had learned enough about the valley to know that their standards were high and their decisions final. The council met in a large circular building at the heart of the settlement, its design incorporating architectural elements from all the cultures represented in the community. Elena presided, but the decision would be made collectively by representatives of all the major groups. Ghostwalker Tahana, Carlos Mendoza. Elena began formally. "You have spent 7 days among us, working alongside our people, sharing our challenges and our hopes. The time has come to determine whether you are ready to call this place home." She turned to the assembled council members. "Let each speak their judgment." One by one, the representatives offered their assessments. Thomas Mitchell praised Cole's tactical skills and willingness to put the community's needs above personal glory. Maria Crow Feather spoke approvingly of Tahana's healing knowledge and her respect for different cultural traditions. Juan Elizondo commended Carlos for his craftsmanship and his obvious commitment to building rather than destroying. But it was the final speaker who offered the most meaningful endorsement, a young boy, perhaps 10 years old, who represented the community's children. "They played with us," he said simply. "They told us stories and taught us games and didn't act like we were different colors. They made us feel like we were all just kids together." The simple statement carried more weight than all the adult testimonials combined. This community existed for its children to give them a world where their mixed heritage would be a source of strength rather than shame. Elena smiled as she delivered the council's verdict. "By unanimous decision, we welcome you as full members of our community. May you find here the peace and purpose you have sought, and may you contribute to our shared dream of a better world." As the formal ceremony concluded and celebration began around them, Cole found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with a desperate woman's plea for help and a man's decision to choose compassion over convenience. It had continued through trials that tested not just their courage, but their capacity to grow beyond the limitations of their birth cultures. Now it was ending, or perhaps beginning, in a place where such growth was not just possible but actively encouraged, where children could play together without awareness of racial boundaries, where adults could work together despite historical enmities, where love could transcend the artificial barriers that divided the outside world. Tahana took his hand as the evening's festivities continued around them, her touch reminding him of the spiritual bond that had made their transformation possible. "We are home," she said softly, and Cole knew she was right. They had found more than sanctuary in the Valley of Three Waters. They had found the future imperfect and fragile, perhaps, but real and worth defending. And as the celebration continued into the night, with music and laughter that blended traditions from a dozen different cultures, Cole understood that their greatest adventure was just beginning. For they were no longer Cole Maddox, the guilt-ridden ex-soldier, and Tahana, the captive Apache woman. They were Ghostwalker and his spirit sister, founders of a new way of being human in a world that desperately needed such examples. Their love had been forged in conflict and tested by trial, but it had emerged stronger than the hatred that sought to destroy it. In the end, that might be the most important victory of all. Epilogue: The Seeds of Tomorrow. 5 years had passed since Ghostwalker and Tahana first entered the Valley of Three Waters, and the settlement had grown in ways that surprised even its most optimistic founders. What had begun as a refuge for outcasts and dreamers had evolved into something far more significant, a living demonstration that the seemingly impossible could become reality through patience, courage, and unwavering commitment to shared principles. The morning sun found Ghostwalker standing on the ridge that overlooked the expanded community, watching the daily rhythm of life unfold below. Children who had been born in the valley played alongside those who had arrived as refugees, their laughter echoing off the surrounding peaks without regard for the artificial boundaries that still divided the outside world. In the fields, crop rotation methods that combined Apache agricultural wisdom with Mexican farming techniques and frontier innovation had produced harvests that sustained not just their own population, but provided surplus for trade with friendly neighboring settlements. "Still can't quite believe it's real, can you?" The familiar voice belonged to Carlos, who had climbed the ridge to join his morning contemplation. The former Mexican revolutionary had become one of the valley's most respected builders, his designs incorporating defensive considerations with aesthetic beauty in ways that made their community both secure and welcoming. "Some days it feels like a dream I'm afraid of waking up from," Ghostwalker admitted. "Other days it feels like the most natural thing in the world." Carlos nodded, understanding the complex emotions that came with having found something worth living for after years of merely surviving. "Elena asked me to find you. There's news from the outside world that requires the council's attention." Ghostwalker felt his stomach tighten. News from beyond their protected borders usually meant complications, and after 5 years of relative peace, he had perhaps grown too comfortable with the illusion of safety. They made their way back to the settlement, passing workshops where craftsmen were already at work, creating the goods that had made the Valley of Three Waters known throughout the region for quality and innovation. A reputation for excellence had proven to be their best protection. Even communities that disapproved of their racial integration were willing to trade for their superior products. The council meeting was already in session when they arrived at the central lodge. Elena, now showing silver in her hair, but still radiating the quiet authority that made her such an effective leader, looked up as they entered. Ghostwalker, please sit. We've just received word from one of our trading contacts in Santa Fe. It seems our little community has attracted attention at the territorial level." Ghostwalker took his seat among the diverse group of men and women who helped guide their community's decisions. Tahana was already there, her position as head healer having naturally evolved into a role on the governing council. Her presence still filled him with the same sense of completeness he had felt since their spirit-bonding ceremony, though now it was tempered with the deep contentment of shared purpose and mutual growth. "What kind of attention?" he asked. "The complicated kind," Elena replied with a slight smile. "It seems that Territorial Governor has been receiving reports about our community, some favorable, some less so. The favorable ones describe us as a model of peaceful coexistence that could serve as an example for dealing with ongoing conflicts between different populations. The unfavorable ones characterize us as a dangerous precedent that undermines established social order." Thomas Mitchell, the former cavalry officer who now served as their primary liaison with military authorities, spoke up from across the circle. "I've been hearing rumors from my old contacts. There's talk of sending a formal delegation to investigate our community, partly to assess whether we pose any kind of threat, partly to see if our methods could be replicated elsewhere." Ghostwalker felt a chill run down his spine. Official attention was exactly what they had hoped to avoid. And what's our response to this interest? That's what we need to decide, Elena said. We could try to discourage official visits, keep maintaining our isolation, and hope they lose interest. Or we could embrace the opportunity to show the outside world what we've accomplished here. Tahana leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. There is danger in both paths. If we hide, we confirm the suspicions of those who see us as a threat. If we open ourselves to scrutiny, we risk having our way of life judged by people who may not understand what we've built. But there's also opportunity, added Maria Crowfeather, the Apache elder, who had become one of their most respected teachers. We have proven that people from different tribes can live together in peace and prosperity. Perhaps it is time to share that knowledge with a world that desperately needs it. The debate continued for hours with valid arguments presented on all sides. Ghostwalker found himself thinking about the children he had watched playing that morning, kids who had never known the hatred and division that had shaped previous generations. They deserved to inherit a world that was moving toward greater understanding, not one that was retreating into old prejudices and fears. I think we have to take the risk, he said finally, not because it's safe, but because it's right. If we've really found something valuable here, then we have an obligation to share it. The decision, when it came, was unanimous, but not without reservations. They would welcome the territorial delegation, but on their own terms and with careful preparation to ensure that their visitors understood what they were seeing. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The entire community threw itself into preparing for what everyone understood might be the most important test they had ever faced. Buildings were repaired and improved demonstration projects were organized to showcase their various innovations, and lengthy discussions were held about how to present their achievements in ways that outside observers could understand and appreciate. Ghostwalker found himself appointed to head the committee responsible for planning the delegation's itinerary. It was a role that required him to think deeply about what their community had accomplished and why it mattered to the larger world. We need to show them more than just our material success, he told Tahana one evening as they reviewed their preparations. We need to help them understand that this isn't just about different races living together, it's about different ways of being human, learning from each other. Tahana nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight from their hearth. My grandmother used to say that true wisdom comes not from knowing one way of doing things perfectly, but from understanding many ways well enough to choose the best from each. Is that what we've done here, chosen the best from each culture? I think we've done something even more important, she replied thoughtfully. We've created something new, not Apache or Mexican or white, but something that honors the best of all while belonging completely to none. When the territorial delegation finally arrived on a crisp autumn morning, they brought with them not just curiosity, but the weight of political pressures and social tensions that were shaping the entire American frontier. The group included Governor Samuel Crawford himself, along with military representatives, territorial officials, and several journalists who had come to document what they found. Governor Crawford was a man in his 50s with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, but also the shrewd intelligence of a successful politician. He had been appointed to his position partly because of his reputation for finding practical solutions to complex problems, and partly because his predecessor had failed spectacularly in dealing with ongoing conflicts between different population groups. Mr. Ghostwalker, is it? The governor said as Elena made introductions. I confess I'm curious about your choice of name. Names have power, Ghostwalker replied diplomatically. The name I was born with belonged to a man who made choices he came to regret. The name I carry now belongs to someone who has learned to make better choices. The governor's eyebrows rose slightly. And what kinds of choices would those be? Choosing cooperation over conflict, choosing understanding over prejudice, choosing to build something lasting rather than simply taking what others have built. Over the next 3 days, the delegation was given a comprehensive tour of everything the Valley of Three Waters had accomplished. They saw the integrated schools where children learned not just reading and mathematics, but the languages, customs, and wisdom traditions of multiple cultures. They visited workshops where craftsmen from different backgrounds had developed new techniques by combining their traditional knowledge. They observed council meetings where decisions were made through consensus rather than dominance. But perhaps most importantly, they witnessed the daily interactions between community members, the easy camaraderie between people who might have been enemies in the outside world, the way conflicts were resolved through discussion rather than violence, the obvious pride that everyone took in their shared accomplishments. It's remarkable, Governor Crawford admitted to Ghostwalker on their final evening. I came here expecting to find either a dangerous experiment in social engineering or a naive utopian fantasy. Instead, I find what appears to be a genuinely functional alternative to the divisions that plague the rest of the territory. It's not perfect, Ghostwalker replied honestly. We've had failures, disappointments, people who couldn't adapt to our way of life. But we've also proved that the barriers between different groups of people are not as insurmountable as many believe. And the question is whether what you've accomplished here can be replicated elsewhere under different conditions and with different populations. Ghostwalker considered the question carefully. I don't think you can simply copy what we've done and expect it to work automatically. But I do think the principles we've discovered, mutual respect, shared purpose, willingness to learn from others, those principles could be adapted to many different situations. The governor nodded thoughtfully. And you'd be willing to help with such adaptations, to serve as advisors or consultants for other communities attempting similar experiments. It was the question Ghostwalker had been expecting and dreading. Leaving the valley even temporarily meant risking the peace and security they had worked so hard to build. But it also meant potentially extending those benefits to others who desperately needed them. We'd have to discuss it with the community, he said. Any such decision would need to be made collectively. The community meeting that followed the delegation's departure was one of the most intense in the valley's history. The governor's request had sparked passionate debate about their responsibilities to the outside world versus their obligations to preserve what they had built. We have children to think about, argued one parent. Sending our leaders away on dangerous missions to hostile territories puts everything we've worked for at risk. But those children deserve to inherit a world where places like ours can exist openly, countered another community member. How can we ask them to live in hiding forever? Elena, as usual, found the words that helped clarify their choice. We have always known that our ultimate success would be measured not by how well we could isolate ourselves from the world's problems, but by how effectively we could contribute to solving them. The decision, when it came, reflected the wisdom and courage that had brought them this far. They would accept the governor's request, but with careful safeguards to protect their community and clear limitations on how much they could reasonably attempt. Ghostwalker and Tahana would serve as a consulting team traveling to communities where territorial authorities were attempting to establish peaceful coexistence between different population groups. Carlos would accompany them as an expert on practical implementation, while Elena and other council members would remain in the valley to maintain continuity of leadership. Their first assignment took them to a mining town in Colorado, where tensions between Mexican, Irish, and Chinese workers had erupted into violence that threatened the region's economic stability. The local authorities had tried everything from martial law to segregated housing, but nothing had produced lasting peace. The problem, Ghostwalker observed after spending several days studying the situation, is that everyone is focused on managing the conflict rather than addressing its underlying causes. The root issues they discovered were not racial hatred, but economic competition and cultural misunderstanding. The different worker groups had been deliberately played against each other by mine owners who profited from keeping wages low and working conditions dangerous. Meanwhile, language barriers and cultural differences had prevented the workers from recognizing their shared interests. Working with local leaders who were genuinely committed to finding solutions, Ghostwalker and Tahana helped establish cultural exchange programs that allowed different groups to learn about each other's traditions and perspectives. Carlos organized joint work projects that demonstrated how different group skills could complement rather than compete with each other. Most importantly, they helped establish communication channels that allowed workers to coordinate their efforts for better wages and working conditions. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete, but it was real. Within 6 months, the mining town had gone from being on the verge of race war to serving as a model for labor cooperation that attracted positive attention from across the region. Their success led to more requests from communities throughout the territories and beyond. Each situation was unique, requiring different approaches and solutions, but the underlying principles remained constant. People from different backgrounds could learn to work together when they were given reasons to trust each other and opportunities to benefit from cooperation. As their reputation grew, so did the scope of their influence. They were invited to speak at territorial meetings, to advise federal officials dealing with Native American relations, to consult with business leaders who were discovering that diverse workforces could be more innovative and productive than homogeneous ones. But with influence came new dangers. Not everyone appreciated their message of racial cooperation and cultural understanding. They faced threats from white supremacist groups who saw them as traitors to their race, from tribal leaders who viewed their work as cultural betrayal, from business interests who profited from keeping different groups divided and competing against each other. The most serious threat came during their 3rd year of consulting work when a coordinated campaign was launched to discredit both their methods and their personal histories. Newspapers in several territories published articles describing Ghostwalker as a renegade soldier turned Indian sympathizer and Tahana as a savage squaw corrupting white civilization. The Valley of Three Waters was characterized as a den of racial mixing and cultural degeneracy. "They're trying to destroy not just us, but everything we've built," Tahana observed after reading the latest batch of hostile articles. "Then we fight back," Ghostwalker replied. "Not with violence, but with truth. We show people the results of what we do, not just the rhetoric of what we believe." Their response was characteristically thoughtful and strategic. Instead of engaging in public arguments with their critics, they invited journalists and officials to visit the communities where their methods had been successfully implemented. They arranged for leaders from those communities, people whose lives had been improved by their work, to speak publicly about their experiences. Most importantly, they organized a grand conference in Santa Fe, bringing together representatives from dozens of communities that had benefited from their consultation. The gathering lasted a week and included demonstrations, presentations, and discussions that showcased the practical benefits of racial cooperation and cultural integration. The conference was a turning point. The evidence of success was too overwhelming for even their harshest critics to dismiss entirely. Public opinion began to shift slowly but perceptibly toward recognition that their approach offered genuine solutions to problems that had seemed intractable. But their greatest victory was more personal. On the final day of the conference, they received a telegram from the Valley of Three Waters announcing the birth of the first children to parents from 3 different racial backgrounds, a son born to parents who represented Apache Mexican and Irish heritage. "Three waters flowing together," Tahana said softly as she read the news, "creating something entirely new." Ghostwalker felt tears in his eyes as he realized what the birth represented. It was living proof that their dream of a world beyond racial boundaries was not just possible but inevitable. The future belonged to people who could bridge different worlds, who could find strength in diversity rather than division. As they prepared to return home to the valley for a well-earned rest, Ghostwalker found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with a desperate plea for help from a captive woman and a freight guard's decision to choose compassion over convenience. It had continued through trials that tested not just their courage, but their capacity to grow beyond the limitations of their birth cultures. Now it was expanding into something that could touch lives across the continent and beyond. Their love story had become a model for human cooperation, their personal transformation, a template for social change. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't walked into Murphy's back room that day? He asked Tahana as their train carried them toward home. I think the spirits would have found another way to bring us together, she replied with the serene confidence of someone who had learned to trust in larger patterns and purposes. Some bonds are meant to exist regardless of circumstances. As the familiar peaks of their valley came into view, Ghostwalker felt the deep satisfaction of someone who had found not just personal happiness, but meaningful purpose. They had proved that love could transcend racial boundaries, that cooperation could triumph over conflict, that the future could be different from the past. The seeds they had planted were already taking root in communities across the American frontier and beyond. Children were growing up in a world where their mixed heritage was a source of strength rather than shame, where different cultures were seen as resources to be treasured rather than threats to be eliminated. It was not the world they had been born into, but it was becoming the world they would leave behind. And perhaps Ghostwalker thought as he watched the sun set over the Valley of Three Waters that was the most important legacy any love story could claim. Not just the happiness of two people, but the hope of a better tomorrow for all people.